And my last act in said position was to, my job is to get you quiet and to introduce a man who needs no introduction. So ladies and gentlemen, Brent Cow.
Thank you, everyone, and I'm really honored to be here tonight, and this is going to be a really special night for a number of reasons, and we have some surprises for you. But we want to welcome you here to the Josh Miner Dialogue. So I have this love of serendipity, and I want to try to have this little serendipity theme tonight. So although it sounds like I'm going to be talking a lot about myself, it'll eventually get into Mike. So let me just try this here. But tonight it's I was on NERAC, and I was on the conference committee many years ago, and I had this first serendipitous moment that I was at the Harvard Ed School, and I saw Josh Miner speak. And after that speech, I thought he would be a great keynote speaker for AE. I mean, come on, this is perfect. And so I approached Josh, and he said, you know, he would consider it and to send him the dates, and so that's what I did. And so I had this great serendipitous moment to meet this man. And I know many of you know Josh Miner, who really is essential in bringing Outward Bound to the United States and really the foundation, I guess, for why all of us are here, right? Bringing these ideas from Kurt Hahn in England to us. So tonight, I have this, well, serendipity number 2 is that secretly in my mind I thought that I would, need to come talk with Josh and talk about AEE, maybe, I imagine we're going to become friends. We're going to spend all this time together. This is my excuse, and so I'd say, I'll bring the contract by your house. I will, and so I did those things. But Josh, I found, was incredibly busy. He was busier than me, a PhD student, on NERAC. He was gone all the time. But the wonderful serendipitous part is that I met his wife, Phoebe. And she was just a very kind and generous woman, and she even sat me down in the back, and we had some lemonade, and we kind of talked about the contract and what Josh was to do, and so that was really that was really wonderful experience. Well, as you know, the story goes that Josh came to the conference. He gave this keynote speech, and he just blew the doors off the place. Everyone sort of came up afterwards, and this is kind of the day it was, as people go, "Do we get that on VHS? Is it taped? Can we see this again?" And so, and we just realized that we didn't have it. It was so good and so wonderful, and it was like that magic moment that we lost a bit. And then someone reached out to Josh and said, "Can we get your speech? Did you have it written down?" And the answer was no. It's just off the top of his head. He just gave this incredible talk. So unfortunately, just a few months later after that, we lost Josh. He passed away, and there was this feeling in NERAC that we just lost this moment. It's just, people just dreamed that we had this on video or DVD or some way to capture that. But for those of us there, we just really carry that with us. It's a really special moment. The next sort of serendipitous moment is my good friend Preston Klein and I were driving to a NERAC meeting, and we're talking about what to do about this and this idea of trying to capture these memories and pitch this idea to each other. We pitched the idea to NERAC about the Josh Miner Dialogue series. And this is what we've come to today, and so it's a really, I feel a special connection to this because I remember being in the car talking about this, and now we've had it, I don't know, 16 years, I think? 18 years? Or I'm not going to count right now.
So many names, we're going to change the banner.
So, what's that? So many names, we're going to change the banner. But I want to talk a little bit about Phoebe Miner. And so, Josh and Phoebe were married in the 40s. Phoebe was, I think, a housewife in the 50s, in a time when I was sort of thinking about, well, I met Josh's granddaughter, and I was talking to her, and I said, do you think your grandmother had a lot to do with Outward Bound? Because this is kind of time when women would stay at home and support their husbands and have these sort of traditional sex roles, and I wondered if she went unrecognized maybe for some of that. And so Marilyn went and talked to her grandmother, and she said, you know, Grammy, did you think you helped Grandpa start Outward Bound? Were you involved in that? Were you sort of essential? And this is her turn, says, oh yes, dearie, oh yes. So one of the things I want to do tonight is I really want us to think about and recognize Phoebe Minor. Unfortunately, we just lost Phoebe 10 days ago, but to me, I think that oftentimes we have these unsung heroes in our midst in outdoor education, and so and she's obviously one of them. And so I'm really really glad that we could sort of think about Phoebe tonight. Other serendipitous moment is that through Marilyn, I met her dad, Dan, and Dan Minor has come here tonight, and I'd like Dan to maybe say a few words about his dad and his mom, and if you don't mind, Dan. So can you give a big hand for Dan Minor?
First of all, I do mind. Because I don't really have much prepared, but it is a real privilege to be here. And since my dad was so busy, he really wasn't around for my upbringing. No, he was a great dad. I'd like to think that I could honor him with maybe an anecdote, but he would want me to say something like this, which is to him. He was an educator, or he liked to refer to himself as a fraud. He said, I'm a fraud. And I feel like I'm a fraud because I'm a doctor. I don't know anything about what you people do except through my dad and through the brief time I've known you. And he said, I'm a fraud, Danny, because I'm not a mountain man. I haven't climbed Everest like Willie Unsold, my vice president. I haven't, river kayaked. And what the heck am I doing? But it's because I'm an educator. And education is my passion, and I happened to hit on a good idea. It wasn't even my idea. And he told me, if you have one good idea in your life, you're very lucky. Even if it's not your idea. If it's an idea that can light a passion. It's true. Yeah. Outward Bound was not his idea, but he decided to dedicate his life to bringing Outward Bound to the U.S. and to using it as a tool towards education. So he was an educator that used Outward Bound, and he used to, so one quick device that he came up with was called the Quiet Walk. Does anybody here know what the Quiet Walk is? So you go to an Outward Bound course, and you get out of your cars and your buses, and you end up getting into your group, your small group of 12, with other instructors, and they say, we're going to go on a nice quiet walk now. And you think, oh shoot, should I put on my sneakers? And there's no time. So the instructor takes off, and you all take off after him, and then he starts jogging. And you start jogging, and then he takes off off the trail, and then now you're bushwhacking. And you're in your nice clothes and your street shoes, and now you come to a swamp. And he just barrels right through the swamp, and then you come to a creek, and now you need help to get across the creek. Pretty soon, an hour and a half later, you're back, and you're a mess. And that was your quiet walk. But what my dad used to talk about was that education comes from the Latin, everybody knows, educo, which means to lead out. And this is one of the few times that the instructors in Outward Bound actually lead you out. After that, the instructors are hands off. You do all the stuff. They don't lead you anywhere, but it's to lead you out. And the idea that he had another idea, which was tell the teachers to stop teaching, which is, the answer to any question is meaningless unless the kid asks. And that was another tenet of his. So use the wilderness, let them figure it out, lead them out for the quiet walk, and then they're on their way. So thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you so much for sharing. I really thank Dan for those words, and we're going to have another surprise guest speaker in a moment. But I want to start our next serendipity story. I guess it happens in 1985. As some of you know, I had just invented wilderness therapy. I was a psychology major at the University of New Hampshire, and people were sending me, someone said, you gotta go talk to this guy, Mike Gass, and I ended up in Mike Gass's office, and I said, oh, I have my idea. I actually called it active therapy, and it's kind of telling him about it, and he sort of smiled and kind of like, yeah, it's discovered, and you know, and I was really thrilled, like, wow, this is really great, and so to me, not knowing at that moment, sitting down with this guy, that this is not going to do it too soon, but you know, this is like a life-changing moment for me. Very, very important person in my life that changed my life. I'm meeting at that moment, and so it's just that great serendipitous. I don't know how I ended up at the University of New Hampshire, other than it was a state school, and that's the only one I could afford, and you know, it wasn't like a big plan, I guess, but I ended up just in the right place, and so, I guess that day I say, like, I entered this really great club of people and who have their life changed by Mike Gass. Most of us know Mike as an accomplished researcher, author, speaker, teacher. He's just been such an important person to so many students, to so many people around the world. And so we have one of Mike's friends and admirers here, Fred Bramante, and I wonder, Fred, if you wouldn't mind coming up and speaking a little bit. And Fred is was on the New Hampshire Board of Education, and he's a politician, owner of a great music store, and he is a great advocate for experiential education. And so he and Mike had worked together, and I was hoping maybe
great.
give you a
Thank you.
little time.
Thanks for asking. I ran for governor and I lost. And, but one of the people that worked on my campaign went to work for, in the next election cycle, went to work for Craig Benson, who was running for governor of New Hampshire. And she told him that, you know, you really need to talk to Fred about education. So, Craig and I talked. He asked me to work on his campaign, and he ended up becoming governor of New Hampshire and asked me to chair the New Hampshire State Board of Education. And then he asked me to redesign public education, a charge that most people would have run screaming away from. But it was exactly the charge that I was looking for, because I was a terrible student, like the worst. In my high school, I finished 206 out of 212 kids. I beat 6 kids. And fortunately for me, I majored in science, and even though in college I only had a 2.3 GPA, because as I said, I hated school, but I majored in an area where there are not a lot of teachers, and so even I got a job teaching science. And so I did that for 6 years. But making a teacher's salary, I had started a little family, and I was poor, and I needed some extra money. So I had played in a rock band when I was in college, and through my rock band, I ended up starting this little company with my life savings of $600, and a company called, I'm going to tell you the name of the company, and I'll bet some of you in the room have heard of it. I started a company called Daddy's Junkie Music Stores. Has anybody heard of Daddy's? Could you raise your hand? Look at the hands. I love it. I love it. So I started Daddy's with $600, and we turned it from the smallest of over 11,000 music stores in the United States to the 15th largest in the country, and it was an absolutely amazing ride. And all along the way, that as the company was growing, people were asking me to do interviews and do articles on the company, and I started thinking, I guess they don't know that I'm not very bright. I'm not going to tell them. So then after a while I started thinking, maybe I'm not as dumb as I thought. And I started getting angry about it. And so I have spent the better part of my adult life trying to figure a way to do education that even someone like me could be a success. So that when the governor gave me this charge, I took it on and excited about taking it on. And I remember telling the state board, the rest of the state board members, Governor told me that he wants a new system. I said, I don't know what that system looks like, but I'm a 60s kind of guy who was taught to question authority, and I'm going to ask a whole bunch of questions, and we'll find out where this thing goes. And ultimately, what we came to was that, the governor told me, he said, I want you to challenge everything. So I remember sitting down with members of the board and the members of the commissioner's cabinet, and he had this, the person chairing this committee said, let's get through the easy stuff, the school calendar. We're not going to change anything there. And I said, wait a minute. Why does it have to be 180 days? Who cares about whether it's 180 days? So we took 180 days out of the regulations, first state in the United States to do it. But then we started talking about high school graduation requirements. And why is it that you get credit for time? The amount of time you sit in a class, whether or not you actually learn. If you get an A, B, a C, or a D, you still pass. They move you on to the next level. And we just figured it out on that, like it was like an epiphany moment, that it should be based on learning. And who cares where the learning takes place? And we started talking about all kinds of ways that kids can learn other than sitting in a traditional classroom. And when it became clear to all of us that we were going to move down this experiential learning path, that it was, I was so excited, I couldn't believe it. It was like, I went home, told my wife about it, and she said, I can't believe nobody's thought of this. But obviously, people have thought of this. It was brand new to me. So it was like, how do I get information? How do I learn more about this? So someone said, Fred, there's this guy at UNH, Mike Gass. I need you to go talk to him. And so I would go to Mike and to Pam, and they were my guides on trying to understand this notion of experiential learning. And what we have done in New Hampshire and put it in the state regulations, and it is now spreading across the United States, is this notion that learning can happen anytime, any place. It should be based on the kids' interests, passions, and dreams. And I draw this picture of the old model. This is classrooms, online learning, and experiential learning, this little tiny piece. And in the future, those three circles are going to be the same size. And they're going to link in a Venn diagram. And for virtually every kid, sometimes they're going to be in the classroom, and sometimes they're going to be online, and sometimes they're going to be in a real-world environment. And that's the way education should be. Ultimately, a customized education for every single kid. So what you guys have known for a long, long time, and where I got my training wheels from Mike and from Pam, that we are taking this model, and it is going to be the future of education in the United States. So when Dan told me that Mike was getting this award tonight, I had to be here. It was important to me to come and say, thank you very much, Mike, because you were important to me in helping me to get, as I said, my training wheels, so that we could move this thing forward. So Mike, thank you so much.
Almost word for word what I was going to say next. No, thank you very much, Fred. Let's get to the fun part here. Look at this cowboy. I think one of the things when you have a mentor like Mike, and Mike is a fairly private person. And he does this great way. Of like kind of getting you to talk about yourself, and before I even know it, Mike hasn't disclosed anything about himself, and I told him everything. We're a very harmonious partnership this way. But I always loved in college. We'd find this little nugget about Mike, and it would just be, oh wow, like Mike did this or Mike did that, and so I just loved to just want to share with you a few pictures about this man who we respect and love. So. This is Mike and Mike's attempt to try to get into the cover of Climbing Magazine. And this is and Mike, what's the name of this climb at the time?
Country Club Crack.
Country Club Crack. which is like, I believe this was like the most difficult route
It
at the
was the
time
most difficult crack climbing in the world.
in the world. And so, you know, if we only had GoPros back then, you know, think of how much footage we'd have of Mike doing these things. It would have been great. I also want to know about, understand people who've carried the load, and not just metaphorically. They've really carried the load at times. And so this here's Mike, and that pack is large. I love this photo. This is Mike. What do I say? Paddling in a non-accredited manner. So I have here. And Mike, as some of you know, is a great friend, Craig Dopkin, and they really are our pair. And this is Craig and Mike, and I like the Boston to Baltimore bike ride that we see here. And through Craig, Mike, I don't know if many people know that Mike was a football star in high school and in college, and he played tight end. Which all seem to lead up to the sport that I think he really loves in his days of playing rugby. And so here's Mike Gass. I say in the days when shorts were short and socks were long. Let's there. Here's Mike, and what he's doing right here is he's telling you about what experiential education is. Cross your arms. Here it is. Or again. So those of you that don't know that about Mike,
Ask him later.
just ask someone who's from UNH, and they'll let you know. So Mike has gifted us, as a researcher. He's had over 100 scholarly publications and 14 books, 25 book chapters, 61 peer-reviewed papers that he's published. And he's given us great books like the Book of Metaphors. This one we're going to skip over because that's not his. But Amazon thinks it is. Adventure Therapy, Effective Leadership and Adventure Programming, which this is the most popular text in outdoor leadership in the country. Mike was instrumental in establishing the Brown Center, and this is a letter about that, establishing the Brown Center from President Gordon Holland of UNH. But I think that most of all, Mike is really, truly a family man. He loves his family, and I think this is kind of this little anecdote I think really describes Mike to me, is that I know when my wife Beth and I were when she was pregnant and we're thinking about having a family, what we did is we got like the Barry Brazelton book and we started like looking through and trying to learn something, and probably a lot of us do that. Some of you might build a crib or do something, and so what Mike did is he got a doctorate in family therapy. That is Mike, right? He loves his family. Here's his daughter, and I think his daughter has probably honored him, I know, in such a special way by coming to UNH, majoring in outdoor education, and she's now a wilderness therapist. And so I know that she not only has her dad as a father figure, but also her professional role model, and I think that that's got to be really special. Here's Mike with his son Tony, and one of the things that Mike didn't talk about a lot, but I would see him. And Tony went to college in Baltimore, and Mike was always flying to Baltimore, trying to catch as many soccer games as he could, and he's a really devoted father, and he has just this wonderful family. His youngest son Andrew has worked for me. He's a great guy, and what my wife says is he's very popular at the town beach. Seems to have like a lot of young women following around. But the Gass family is just a wonderful family, and they've always been so willing to help in sort of any moment. And I know all kinds of people in Durham and around the country who get all the support from Mike. So, just a few more slides here of Mike, but I want to I'd make sure I wasn't wearing the same shirt. Okay. You know, Mike's been an innovator, a researcher, a creator, and a thinker, and he has made such a tremendous contribution to outdoor education. And so I'm going to encourage you in a moment to give Mike sort of a fraction of the applause that he deserves. But I want to talk about the biggest serendipitous moment for me is that moment of just having that moment, that meeting Mike and having him in my life. I never knew that he would, you know, be at my family's wedding, that he'd become my, I shouldn't have looked at you. You know, my mentor, my graduate advisor, the chair of my dissertation, my PhD. And one of the things I always cherish about Mike, I've never had someone that was so happy to see me married and to have a son. And when I brought my son to him, Mike just loves kids, and that just made me feel so connected to him and all the love that he has. So I want you to please welcome our Josh Miner dialogue speaker this year, Mike Cass.
I value most about teaching is I get a chance to touch the future. I teach, and I've learned more from this one than she's learned from me. So they have a series of questions they're going to ask, and there are other questions if you want to ask me on the board back there. We'll get those woven in somehow. Yeah. So.
Is this on? No. Is that better?
No, not yet? Okay, there we go. So I wanted to start just by saying that I've been carrying this around all day, trying to figure out how to get my body through this sheet of paper. I don't know if that's been perplexing anybody else. For those of you that weren't in Nate Pullen's play note last night, you'll have to ask somebody what I'm talking about. But in all seriousness, I've been carrying this around all day in my pocket, wondering how I was going to show up tonight for this great night and this honor. And so I just wanted to share with you all that I am showing up as a student of Mike's. I did my undergrad at UNH studying outdoor education, and I'm back there now getting my dual master's degree. So I'm showing up as a student of Mike's, but oh, sorry, I'm already emotional. I knew if he was gonna cry, I was gonna cry. I'm also showing up as somebody that looks at Mike as a mentor, as I'm sure many of you do. And just to share a quick little story about me is when I was deciding to come back to grad school, I met with Mike in New Hampshire a couple years ago, and I also had this big idea that I wanted to tell him about. He said, okay, come over, let's go get lunch in the dining hall. And he took me out to lunch and said, tell me about your big idea. And I said, well, I'm gonna build a 170-foot sailboat that costs $10 million, and I'm gonna sail all over the world with college students doing accredited semester programs. And he looked at me and said, that's a great idea. How can I help? Which I just wanted to kind of poll the audience here and get a show of hands. Has anyone come to Mike with an idea and had him respond, how can I help? A lot of folks here from UNH in the front. And I just think that's such a testament to who Mike is, he gives so much of himself to other people and supporting. I know for me, he always just supports my ideas and my dreams. When most people look at me and say, "Oh, that's crazy, you're never going to raise $10 million," Mike says, "Let's make it happen." So that's the person I'm showing up as tonight, a student, but also someone who really appreciates Mike as a mentor. And I'll hand this over to Pam.
Thank you, Casey. Who am I showing up as? As a person with profound gratitude. Similar to Brent, though 5 years prior, in 1980, I had just come back from a Knowles semester course, and the only reason I was at UNH was to row crew. Does that sound familiar? And for the third semester in a row, I didn't get a single class I had signed up for, and I was kind of done. It's time to pack up and go back to Jersey and figure it out from there. There was a flyer that talked about rock climbing. And as I headed down, ready to pack my bags and get out, because of course the class was full, and I was just turning around, and Mike goes, "But wait a minute. You're more than a person that can't get into rock climbing. Tell me more." 35 years later, I'm still telling, and he's still listening. One of the things with Casey and myself, meeting with Mike prior to this and saying, how can we really make this special? As those who know Mike, he said, well, what about the audience? Like, what do you mean about the audience? This is about you. And I said, okay, I'll figure out something. So what I somewhat figured out was those index cards. So take a moment, if you haven't written on one, this is your chance to ask a question of Mike by writing it on index cards and passing it to the middle aisle, and we're gonna have a service crew come on up and give me the index cards. And as Casey is asking questions, I'll be going through and we'll see what we have time. So I give you a topic, ask a question of Mike, discuss, write, pass to the middle. Take a minute or two, so go for that.
I'm trying to hit home runs with every student I meet. And I want someone like Bridget to come up and say, I won't make her come up there, but she's looking at me smiling. And I'm saying when she comes to me and says, that was the best class I ever had in my life. And I turned to her and I said, we're just getting started. Yeah. And then to Brad, to honor him, we had a thing where I walked up and I said, have everyone sign a name on the inside of a t-shirt. And we did that, and I said, there's someone I want to honor this day. And I brought up Brad, and I talked about how he's contribute more. He's kind of the silent person of our equipment room, and how he just goes about his art form on his own. And what it is that everyone in class had signed their names on the front and the back, and I had them put on an outdoor education t-shirt, and I said, notice that on the ones on the back, those are all your classmates that are patting you on the back. And the ones on the front, those are the ones that are closest to your heart. Have you worn that shirt? Great. So one of the things that Viktor Frankl says that I believe that I've shared with a lot of the students in preparation for today is that you need to teach to where students can be if they're exceptional. Don't teach to where they're at or where they are, because then they'll just stay the same. But if you create a spark inside of them because they have to overemphasize themselves, that's where we should be teaching them. And that's what I try to do with each one of them.
So what's your advice to the emerging professionals as they strive to make a positive impact in the field?
I think I'll go back to what Fred said. What we're doing is important. And we're more than that speck, we're growing there. Each and every person in this room was brought to this room because of the passion you felt and you've seen in the clients you've worked with. The spark with Casey, the spark with Ben, Min, the group that's going to Nepal, that opportunity. That's why we're important. And what you're doing, you may not feel it. And I'm working really, really hard to try to make us validated through our research and what we do. So, with Anita, we've led great promise for adventure therapy in the field. I couldn't have done any of that without her. But united, I've created something that I never thought I could do. That type of work needs to happen across all of us here. And we need to support one another and ask tough questions, but also know how important we are. So thanks, Fred.
A little twist here.
Okay.
From what failure in your career did you learn the most, and why?
There's so many. I think, first of all, you have to understand the doctoral process, getting a dissertation. It is a solo journey. You basically are taught to take all these classes, big statistical things. You don't have Dr. Tucker to help you at anywhere but UNH. And then when you get to the point that's there, you have to go sequester yourself away inside a building and write this huge behemoth paper that's this big, and then never publish that thing again unless you do it in journal articles. It's ridiculous. What you should be trained to do is how much you connect. How much can you relate to others? How much can you work with a team like Fred when he comes to you? How much can you work with a team like Anita when she comes to you? How, when you have this wonderful idea from this incredibly brilliant young person, how can you make sure it happens? Your ability to relate and have a strong relationship with your colleagues should be the final test of your doctorate. And probably the place that I've failed the most is with doctoral students, because we have a doctoral program there and they all want to have families and they all want to move other places where they have jobs. And I have the hardest time getting them to graduate because they all go on with their lives. Except when someone like Brent Bell comes and says, you're expecting to get married, have a kid, and finish your dissertation all in 6 months. I don't know how he did it. We did it because of Beth. Yeah, I asked Beth. But that's it, is that I think I've become more vocal against the system of operating in that type of way, because it really isn't truly how we get things done.
There's lots more questions here, and unfortunately not a whole lot more time. So I want to ask, is there a question you'd like me to ask, or something you'd just like to answer?
Trying to think. I think the big thing to understand is how important risking is. To risk is to keep your identity building and growing. And when you're faced with a challenge and you're not able to overcome that challenge, and that challenge is facing you right in the very eyes of what you're doing, you have the courage to change. And that's so hard. And that's why the arms folded happens. It's moving that way. The other thing is to be present and be in the moment. Don't put so much stock in the future. Don't rely on the past. make sure that you live in the present of this time when we're here. Because that's what the outdoors taught me. But climbing is so involving with the rock that it's such a feeling of grace and beauty as well as harmony to rock climb for me. And it's brought me my greatest joy in life as well as tragedy in that part. But that's the game you play with heavy risk-taking.
So one of the qualities of Mike, if you've been with him, is, as I said earlier, is that, and as Brent alluded to as well, that you can find yourself sharing a lot of yourself, but not necessarily hearing a lot about Mike. And so rather than just have Casey and myself ask questions, how we'd like to conclude this is Casey's going to be writing down what you say, and we're going to create, for those who know it, a word cloud. So what that means is basically, whether it be what you've heard tonight or spanning back, like in my case, 35 years, what's a word or a phrase that when you think of this amazing being and how you've been touched by him, that we want you to try to capture it in a word or a phrase, just a word or a phrase. And the way we're going to do it is similar to if you've ever done Zen clap, which is when you feel so moved, just stand up and say that word or phrase. When you sit down, the next person just popcorns up. So we'll do this for about 5 minutes or so. So first, just take a moment. I know it's really tough. How do you put all of this into one word? And so you also get to repeat a word that you've heard before, because that's kind of the rules of a word cloud. While you're thinking, if I could have a service crew turn the lights on so Mike can actually see who's saying these words, that would be wonderful. Right, so once again, some folks are going, what was that again? So when you think of Mike Gass, what's a word or phrase that comes to mind?
I'd say energized.
The real deal.
Mentor.
Compassionate.
Eloquent. Eloquent.
Grace. Grace.
Authentic. Inviting. Insightful.
Inspiration.
Playful.
Understanding.
Funny as hell.
Welcome. Possibility.
Selfless.
Deeply thoughtful.
Invested.
Genuine.
I get to say it again. I don't know what the best words.
Sincere.
A good father.
Jelly beans. Ask Mike about that one.
I like gifts.
mentor.
I want to explain the jelly bean thing. Christina said, you know, you're not getting enough students to come up and see you. I said, well, it's 3 floors up in an obscure, locked away place in New Hampshire Hall. And she said, you have to do something to get students to come up there. So I brought jelly beans there, and I have a big lounger chair, and granola bars, anything to coax the student upstairs to see me. And Dr. Tucker is the biggest jelly bean eater of all.
Generous.
Pioneer.
Intentional.
Guide.
Fireside.
Yeah.
Humble.
Motivating.
Yeah, you're kind of stubborn.
Thanks, boss.
I was gonna say boss, but then it's an inside joke.
Welcoming.
Thank you. Helpful.
Caring.
Thanks.
Ripple effect.
I'd like to end with a story. Surprise. And there will be 2 parts of the story. One is climbing a volcano in Mexico with my partner here to go with. And we had a student who needed to go down before we summited on Orizaba, which is the 5th highest mountain in North America. And Pam and I were there, and we needed someone to take it down, and I turned to her, and she just knew that it was important for me to have her go to the top and to me to take the student down. And just that time exemplifies our career together of just these moments of tragedy and success. And I wouldn't be up here without her. And there's a reason why she's 10 years before me. It took me a while to catch up to her. The sparks of the future are here on my right. And when someone comes to you with their dream, you have to find a way to say yes. That's your passion, lies in others of what their dreams are to make it reality. That's what a teacher does. Be there as a teacher, like Christian does. I'm sure with his students at Plymouth, I hear them say that all the time. And make sure that you have opportunities to dream big, because we are important. You are valuable. And we will have our day in the school system, in the therapy office. The world needs us more than ever before. Thank you for this gift.